this is your host, Julia Nepini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I am your host, Julia Nepini, and I'm here today with Colleen Wenner. She has become one of my go-tos for support in the realm of business, practice ownership, managing a team, and I am very grateful for her insight. So I am thrilled at the opportunity to talk to her today and learn more about her climb. Welcome, Colleen.
Hey, Julia. It is so good to be here. I was so excited when I heard that you were launching your podcast and getting ready to just kind of get out there and do something new. I'm so thrilled to be a part of it.
I appreciate that, and that's one of the beautiful things about these collaborations that come from our online world, because we can just be cheering each other on, sitting on the sidelines, in the thick of it, and I greatly appreciate that support. So if you could introduce yourself for the audience, tell them a little bit more about you and what you do.
Absolutely. I'm Colleen Wenner, and I own a group private practice in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which is kind of in the panhandle near Pensacola. Nobody really knows where Fort Walton is unless you visit Destin on vacation. But we service primarily trauma and addictions. That's our primary focus, has been since, well, the beginning of my climb, it has been in trauma focused care, and then I kind of fell into addictions work along the way. So, but yeah, we're a small group. We have 5 clinicians and a life coach and a biller, and we kind of muddle our way along, and we're learning as we go, and it's been a really fun process. There's been some hiccups along the way, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Oh, well, it's been so wonderful to see that growth, and congratulations on your licensed clinician that you recently hired, which is
hallelujah.
Big. How's that been so far?
Ooh, that took forever. Oh my gosh, but it's been so nice, because even just Tuesday night, it was nice to be able to have a licensed person on site so that he could supervise my interns, and I could leave at 5 o'clock instead of 7:30. Like, that's just like a little benefit there, but yeah, he's a really good guy, and I'm finding he's fitting into the practice culture very nicely. So that's always a wonderful feeling as an owner.
Definitely. Thrilled to hear that. Well, we were talking about how podcast interviews can be an opportunity to pause and reflect. So looking back, is this what you had envisioned for yourself in your career?
I knew that I always wanted to have a business. I wasn't sure what that actually looked like until later.
Okay.
I was born, or I was adopted into a family who my father was self-employed his entire life. So I learned the benefits of being in business for yourself. I also learned a lot of the drawbacks of being in business for yourself. And along the way, I thought, I'd like to do this. I really would like to do this, but I'm going to have to do it my way, which was very different than my father's. He was a fruit farmer and contracted with Welch's, and I just was outside all the time, and it was a wonderful life to grow up on a farm. I learned so many invaluable lessons. But my business in mental health, in the world of mental health, was going to look very different than what his did. But there were a lot of transferable lessons along the way that I found. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's been kind of where I started from. And when I finished my bachelor's in '92, I finished my master's in '97 in counseling and educational counseling, actually. And at that point, I was working in a very, very small community mental health company outside of Philadelphia. Enjoyed working there so much. They gave me such a good place to land as I was working on my master's, and then after I received my master's, had one of the best supervisors of my life in that practice, which really taught me about boundaries and about ethics and about the real clinical care and deep issues and how to, tenderly walk clients through the healing process. And I was there for probably 8 years. Okay. And I grew actually a drug and alcohol prevention program there as like the day work I was doing, and then I also did evening outpatient counseling.
Okay.
After that, I had started, kind of simultaneously, I did a lot of this stuff all at the same time, all part-time, but I was a behavioral specialist in a wraparound program that had a behavioral specialist, a mobile therapist, and a therapeutic staff, and I would write the treatment plans and then kind of supervise the team as they met with the families in the communities. And I absolutely loved that work too. It was just a little bit more exhausting because of the travel and because of the environment, and there's a lot of bonuses meeting people in their homes about really getting to see what their culture is like, and I loved that. But it came to a point where I really needed to kind of shift and be less traveling. Like, I started having a family and all that. So I did that consultant work for a long time. I moved to North Carolina from Philadelphia, and in North Carolina, my kids were very young, and so I started looking for jobs like directing the kind of programs that I had experience with, and I got a great position directing a in-home children's counseling program, and I had probably 6 clinicians working under me, and it was wonderful. But then I was diagnosed with cancer. And so when breast cancer, just kind of pops up into your life, you have to change some things. And so I found that, I was trying to work through it, and I had my surgery before I started, and thought at 4 weeks I was going to be ready to go, post-surgery, and I wasn't, but I tried really hard to work for 6 months full-time in this position until I really had to face the fact that my body wasn't healing, and I still had a port and drains, and it was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
And so and I found myself breaking down at work and realizing I'm not taking care of myself. So I stopped all that, and I took a good couple of years to heal, and both emotionally and physically, and I've been doing very well since. But that led Sean and my husband and I, to a position. I kind of took a back seat for a little while and started supporting him in the ministry. We moved to Niceville, Florida, where he started as a children's pastor. And I did counseling in that role. I was working with the church also, but it was kind of a different side of things for me, and I really enjoyed it a lot. Well, then you find out, okay, well, I'm going to get my license in Florida since I've moved here. What's it going to take? And oh my word. The craziness of the expectations of, I had at this point been out of my master's degree 16 years maybe, and I get in touch with the board and find out that I've got to go back to school and get 3 more classes, and that I have to take the national exam and something about practicum out. I mean, it was crazy. So I appealed a lot of stuff, and I finally got it down to just going back to school for 2 courses, and I did that. Passed my exam the first time. Hallelujah, that was such a stressor. But got my license here in Florida. And I was working at the time at a methadone clinic, which is primarily people that are addicted to opioids in some way, shape, or form. And I absolutely loved that. And it kind of brought together the feel of, I'd seen addictions through all the in-home work I had done, and we were focused mainly on the child, and I never quite got to see the whole family dynamic in a clinical setting. And that's where the methadone clinic really opened my eyes to so much of trauma and addictions being together. So I knew I wanted at that point to start my own private practice. But I loved so much working in the addictions, and knew the socioeconomic status was sometimes such a huge challenge there, like private practice and addictions and whatnot. But I muddled my way through to find a business owner in the area that was willing to kind of take me on and kind of show me the ropes of private practice to see if I could meld the two, you know.
Yeah.
And I was there for a couple of years, and then it was my time to go. And in 2021, I started New Heights Counseling, and it has been since then a great climb towards learning how to treat both trauma and addictions together with all, you know, I've got 20 some years of experience now, and putting it all together, it's just been a joy. There have been challenges along the way, but it's really been a joy. I have to look back and be thankful.
So not an easy climb at all, but what I'm hearing is that once you set your sights on something, you are going to make it happen, and you did not let any of these things derail you. And I'm happy that you were ultimately taking the time that you needed to, like you said, heal, but then you came back with a vengeance. And that really challenging time of moving to Florida and having to abide by all of those criteria in order to get licensed here, to ultimately land where you are today, I'm assuming that it all feels worth it to be managing your own team and doing this incredible work and this kind of duality of addictions and trauma and weaving it together and the people that you're helping. Do you think of it in that way, that like looking back you might not have realized at the time what it was all for, but to now be in this place and reflect feeling like it was worth it?
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, I always knew I enjoyed working with kids. And so that's where my career started. But then when you work with kids, you have to work with families. Like, you can't not work with families. Yeah. And so I learned really early on some of the best ways to, you know, involve a whole family and just really kind of use the richness of the family experience to help the child. And, you know, through that is when, you know, addiction started popping up in just about every client that I was working with's lives. And, you know, it's kind of been a slow progression along the way, but now to be able to look at focusing on where a person is starting on their journey, and if it's, you know, their first foot in recovery and that process, or whether it's, you know, someone comes to us after they've been in recovery for a little while and they, I'm sorry about the noise. We live next to Eglin Air Force Base, and the F-15s fly by, so if you hear that, I apologize.
Kind of cool, but not something that everybody experiences.
So anyway, it has been neat to see it kind of come together, and now I'm really in a good position I never want to be in a place where I feel like I'm like the specialist know-it-all expert. I always am consulting with my EMDR consultant and with my own therapist and a life coach, and having the ability to have, you know, other community private practices that we get together and we consult, because my real heart is teaching, and I love raising up and helping interns and people coming into the field to really develop their skills.
So tell me more about that, because I know through us connecting through like a mastermind group and then kind of forming our own small group, I've learned a lot about that particular journey, and I have had a very different experience than yours. So tell me more about this. Obviously, it sounded like hiring a licensed clinician was the goal, but you have done some incredible work and provided these opportunities to those that are pre-licensed. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's, you know, I started supervising interns way back in the early 2000s, when I was still working with that small counseling agency outside of Philadelphia. So it's kind of developing like, okay, I really do like to teach. And so, you know, as I've been able to do that over the years, I realized, you know, I wanted to jump into a practice, get a few licensed people around me, and then, you know, once they got to be supervisors, bring in some new, you know, students and or pre-licensed people and help them learn well. Because I had some experiences where I learned very well, especially my first experience, but I had other experiences along the way that were very difficult and very challenging. And I wanted to kind of make it not easy, but make it, I guess, just a journey that somebody would want to take with the depth of experience that would be good as a new person, in the field. So what I found is that there was nobody around here with a license that wanted to be hired in June, July, August of 2021 when I had gotten started. And so I was working with a business consultant at the time, and she said, well, why wouldn't you consider maybe an intern? Because I was getting all these resumes from interns. And I was like, I really want to hire another licensed person, but,
Right.
And so we talked it through, and she was real encouraging about giving them a shot. Just treat them like you would when you're hiring somebody new, but know their experience level is different. So I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. And I interviewed one, and I thought, well, this lady's pretty sharp. It was like her second career, and I thought, this is good. So I brought her on as a student, and then when she graduated in December of that year, I hired her. At the same time that I brought on her, she said, I have a friend. And this friend was looking for a different practicum site, and I'm like, well, send her my way. I'll interviewed her, hired her a month later. They both graduated in December of that year, and I hired both of them. And it was such a neat process to watch how, like, I didn't really have a format or like, this is what you're going to learn in month 1, this is what you're going to learn in month 2, and this is what you're going to learn in month 3. But I just brought them along and like baby steps through the process of learning EHR and learning how to build rapport and learning attunement and learning, how to use your clinical strategies that you've learned in school. And it just was kind of like easy. It was an easy flow,
Wow.
So at that point, that was December of 2021. The first intern says to me, I have another friend, and I had been getting resumes from lots of interns, and I said, well, I'll interview her, because I had interviewed some and it just wasn't a match for the culture, and then I interviewed this third one, and she was awesome. She was absolutely awesome. And so I brought her in, hired her. She had just finished her degree. So now I've got 3 pre-licensed, what Florida calls registered interns, or other states call associate licensed, and we're just starting to build momentum. This was, January of last year. And found one person moving to state that had his license, got him here, hired him, then realized he wasn't fit for Florida license. They knocked him down a peg or two and said he had to take courses, and same thing I had been through.
Right.
So I had to help him walk through that, and he wasn't quite as gun-ho about getting it done. And so like, push came to shove. They had a lot of medical issues. We had to let him go, but it was kind of a mutual thing in the end. So I'd be like, okay, maybe there's more interns out there, and interviewed some licensed people along the way, but it wasn't like, I was not in a hurry to rush to find, a good fit. I wanted it to be a natural good fit.
Yeah.
So
Well, it seems like it worked, and some of the greatest team members can come from those that are already pre-existing, because they're actually speaking to what it's like on the job, and they have a heads up before they come on board. Okay, so what happened from there?
Absolutely. I was able to bring on a couple of students from another university, a student, she lived 45 minutes away, and she had called around to 30 different counseling agencies near where she lived. None of them picked up the phone, and the ones that did weren't open to interns. And when I said, I'll interview you, she was fantastic, a woman a little later on. She's in her 40s, not like a fresh out of school, but fresh out of school for counseling. And headed off. And she's still with me today as a student. She should be graduating in a few months. And then one more intern from the same school approached me, and I just brought her on a couple months ago. So right now I'm working with that group, and it's been such a joy to see them grow and learn and be moldable. Like, that's my thing. When I sit down and I interview people, I'm like, I need you hungry, humble, and smart. I already know you're smart based on what you've been able to accomplish, but I need you hungry and humble too. Tell me how that's going to work in my practice. And so that's been my thing. Like, I need them to want to learn and not to be afraid of correction, and to be, willing to really put the work in. So it's been a neat climb.
So I know practice owners who are one extreme or the other. It is either all about interns or newly licensed clinicians, and then there are some that are just absolutely not. I wouldn't even consider it. So I am hearing a lot of the pros, I would assume, that you would identify. So the fact that they don't have to unlearn any bad habits. You are really walking them through, right? And so you already know that, when you say smart, those skills are fresh. They are actually in the classroom or were very not that long ago. They can immediately bring it into what they're doing. They're not far removed from it, and you're helping them to make those connections. But then I would think you also get this level of commitment, because once they've signed on with you, they ultimately want that licensure, and this is that opportunity to get that supervision and obviously be in this type of a setting, which I'm sure is very desirable for someone in that position. And then you're also able to be there cheering for them once they reach that milestone of licensure, and you're also committing to them. So I'm sure it breeds some loyalty as well. And how nice that some of the clinicians that you had ultimately spread the word. And so you now have worked with how many schools? So the 3 were all from one program, and then...
Yes. Yeah, Troy University is a local, Troy's in Alabama, but they have a Fort Walton Beach campus. And so Troy University is one, and then Walton University, which is an online school. I've worked with them too. So
Okay. Got it. Very cool. So tell me a little bit more about your role as business owner. So thinking back when you were talking a little bit about your dad and his influence, and you were talking about how there were some transferable lessons, but it sounds like some specific things that you shifted and changed for yourself. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, I think that some of the most powerful lessons I learned from my father was good customer service. Like treating people better than they expect, undersell, overdeliver, being in a place where you can look at anyone and respect them for who they are at the get-go. That was something my dad taught me, like just that minimum level of respect you have for everyone, because they are a human being and they deserve it. And that, I think, flowed real well into the whole building a counselor identity and understanding how acceptance is a huge part of being a counselor, not condoning behavior, but accepting them where they're at. So I think those are huge things that helped from my father. Under promising and over delivering is something that I think is one of the biggest things that's been so helpful, because I never want to give somebody false hope or to give them a sense that we have this magical solution in counseling, because it takes a lot of hard work. But I've had a lot of very pleased people come through my practice, and I've been able to kind of cut down my caseload. So it's really my pre-licensed people and some of my students that are really carrying a lot of this, and they're doing good work, and it's so good to hear the results. And you don't hear it that often, but there are some really cool occasions where you hear a client just send a email out of the blue or whatnot, and that's to me a testament to building in the right values from the beginning.
So those are some great transferable lessons. You were talking about some of the downside. So even seeing that early experience, it sounds like business ownership was still something that you were very clear you wanted to do. What were some of the biggest components that kind of kept your eyes on the prize even when there were challenges?
What kept my eye on the prize? I think the ability to make something that's bigger than me. Like, we all want to leave an impact in the world. And I really, I've met a lot of people through my career, and I've helped a lot of people through my career, and that's cool. But can I multiply that? Can I make that bigger? Can I allow God to reach through me into others and multiply the impact of what it looks like to genuinely love and respect people and help them walk through some of the hardest times of their lives. That was the prize for me, is leaving a little bit of a legacy of something that's bigger than me, because I can't do this all by myself,
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say are your core values? I know we had talked about how integrity is one of mine and something that I try to weave through these episodes. What would you say are yours?
Hard work. Definitely hard work. Learned that from my dad. And acceptance, huge. Compassion, huge. Radical authenticity, huge. Those are the big ones. I think those are all in my mission statement, of what New Heights Counseling is. But I think the biggest one, I don't know if it's the biggest one, but what kind of ties it all together is that respect. That genuine respect that you have to treat everyone as a human being that deserves, time, attention, and compassion.
Well, and I also commend you for, as you were growing this team, I know that a lot of times, and I can speak to this, we grew really fast. And it seems like for you, it was being very conscientious to fit and culture and really taking that time to make sure. What were some of the things that you did throughout that process while you were interviewing or kind of weeding through those applicants to do everything that you could at the outset to make sure that they would be a successful, positive addition to the team?
Well, I think some of it was a faith walk, because it's really hard. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character, as a counselor, as a therapist. Not that I try to size people up before I hear their story, but I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character. But at the same time, when you're talking about like working every day with these people and seeing these same faces every day, like, are these people I can do life with? Was a huge question. Am I, because we spend a lot of hours working. But that's probably the biggest one, is like, can I do life with these people, and there are some that I think I probably could have done life with really well, but more as friends than as business.
Sure.
I think that's a huge part, and just relying on knowing that because it's bigger than me, there's a force with the Lord, in me that's bigger than me, and if there's a connection there, that really kind of levels the playing field. We actually have, what's interesting about our practice is that all of my team knows that I'm a Christian, and that I kind of come from that perspective. Although I've counseled people from every different, I've seen Buddhist and I've seen Hindu, I've seen, over the years, just a plethora of different types of cultural religious backgrounds. And I think it's awesome that I've got another born again Christian, I've got a Buddhist, and I've got an atheist, and that are all therapists that come from a certain background, that but they have substance to them. There's substance to them, and they're going to reach people I can't, and so I can't necessarily, I'm not a Christian counseling practice, but that's who I am. But I am open to and want to be kind of a lighthouse for anybody that wants to,
Yeah. Wow. So in terms of takeaways, so for those listening and, ultimately business owners or those who are considering becoming business owners, there could be a mental health component or not, maybe just an interest in mental health, and those who are clear on their values, and I would hope integrity and compassion being some of those. What would you say are the biggest lessons or things that are keeping you moving forward and continuing to do this work in times when it gets particularly hard?
What keeps me moving forward? I really believe in the power of empowerment. I think that if we can, even the clerk at the grocery store, even if we can empower somebody to smile, or empower somebody to believe in themselves, or empower somebody to take that next step, that's what drives me on. Like knowing that I can be a positive force in somebody else's life. And I take my team life very seriously. And I want them to have a very good work-life balance. I start them out with small caseloads and build them slowly, making sure that they're managing, their best at, their personal selves and their professional selves before we add to that. But empowering others really is that's just a big deal to me. That means the world. Yeah.
Well, it comes across. I mean, you are definitely a light and somebody that I found myself drawn to because there is this energy and this, everything that you're describing, it definitely shows in your, your support and in your suggestions and your guidance, and the respect factor is big, and the values that you identified definitely show through. So your team is very lucky to have you. I am thrilled that everything has landed you to this place. So if people want to learn more about your practice, if they want to follow you and your journey, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. New Heights Counseling, again, is in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Our web address is florida-counseling.com, and my email is colleen@florida-counseling.com. So I can be reached there, and there's a contact form on our website for future clients or future interns or future prospective consultants. I'm an EMDR consultant also, so there's there's a way to reach me on there that kind of encompasses all that. So if anybody's interested, they can find me. Yeah.
All right, awesome. And I will make sure to include all of that in the show notes to make it really easy for people to follow. Thank you so much for the work you do and for your time today.
Julia, this has been a pleasure. It really has.
All right, until next time, take care, everybody. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Nepini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.